All right, today we're going to get back to looking at the New World that's being explored. But first of all, before we get into some of the Spanish explorers, we talked about some of them yesterday, and especially the more well-known ones, and then we also got into the English explorer John Cabot. But I want us to take a few minutes to look at the civilizations that were here prior to the Europeans coming. So first of all, we have a look here at Central America, and you can see two of the major civilizations that were in existence prior to Europeans coming. And that's, first of all, the Aztec Empire. You've probably all heard of that. And maybe some of you have heard of the Mayan Empire. Mayan, primarily Central America, Aztec, part of Central and up into Mexico. You can see there's some other cultures around as well. So these were in existence, quite advanced civilizations, maybe more so than what we might think. Now we want to look for a minute at the Aztec Empire. This is about the time that the Spanish came, in particular Cortez, as we'll see. Here's the capital city, Tenochtitlan, which is where Mexico City is today. You can see the outer edges of the empire, some of the tributary states, allied states, and so on. Here's, of course, where the direction from which the Spanish came. Now, I think it's interesting to look at the preparation, if you will, of the Aztecs for the coming of the Spaniards. It wasn't something that happened in a vacuum. There were a series of omens that had occurred prior to this that kind of let the Aztecs know that something bad was going to happen. An omen, of course, is something you see that lets you know that something bad is coming. So look at these omens together with me. I don't know if you can read them all from where you are. I'll read them to you. The first bad omen was 10 years before the Spaniards first came here. A bad omen appeared in the sky. It was like a flaming ear of corn, or a fiery signal, or the blaze of daybreak. It seemed to bleed fire, drop by drop, like a wound in the sky. It was wide at the base and narrow at the peak, and it shone in the very heart of the heavens. Now, if you saw something like that in the sky, would that get your attention? Yeah, okay. And of course, when throughout the world, and the ancient world up into this time period, when people saw things like that in the sky, they normally thought that there's something bad going to happen. Even the appearance of a comet would cause people to think that something bad was going to happen. So that's one thing. The second omen was that the temple, and I won't try to pronounce that word, burst into flames. Suddenly the temple just caught on fire. Thirdly, another temple was damaged by a lightning bolt. The fourth bad omen, fire streamed through the sky while the sun was still shining. Fifth, the wind lashed the water until it boiled. So the wind was so strong that the water looked like it was boiling. And the sixth bad omen was the people heard a weeping woman night after night. Can you imagine hearing that outside the city walls? You hear a woman weeping, and nobody knows who it is or where it's coming from, night after night. So those are some things that the Aztecs experienced that kind of let them know that there's something bad that's going to happen. And of course, for them, it was bad. But there was a seventh one. The men whose work is in the Lake of Mexico trapped a dark feathered bird resembling a crane and took it to, as Montezuma, that's the way they were spelling it, so that he might see it. Now, Montezuma is the king over the Aztecs. This bird was so unique and marvelous that no one could exaggerate its strangeness or describe it well. A round diadem was set in its head in the form of a clear and transparent mirror in which could be seen the heavens, the three stars in Taurus, and the stars in the sign of the Gemini. So this bird had like a crown on. It was like a mirror, and you could look in that mirror and you would see the constellations, the stars in the sky. Maybe it was just reflecting. Maybe they were looking at night. But I think they were smart enough to figure that wasn't the case. When Montezuma saw this, he was filled with dread and wonder, for he believed it was a bad omen to see the stars of heaven and the diadem of that bird. When Montezuma looked into the mirror a second time, he saw a host of people, all armed like warriors, coming forward in well-ordered ranks. They skirmished and fought with each other and were accompanied by strange deer and other creatures. An eighth omen. Monstrous beings appeared in the streets of the city. That's all the description we have, but apparently some kind of animals that they had never seen before, some kind of monsters just appeared in the streets. Yeah. In the record, the Aztecs have written records, so these things were written down. Yeah, Steve?
So, like, this all actually happened, or
from what they said, this is what actually happened.
okay.
And April 1519, Hernando Cortez began exploring the Yucatan, the peninsula 6 off of Mexico. And in November, he meets the Mexica leader, Montezuma. Here is a painting that someone did of Cortez meeting Montezuma. Now, as Cortez landed, he was given orders not to go in from the coast. He was supposed to maintain his position on the coast of the mainland. But he determined to go inland when gifts from the Aztec king Montezuma enticed him. Now, Montezuma sent gifts to Cortez because he thought that Cortez was the reincarnation of their white god, Quetzalcoatl. The legend had it that Quetzalcoatl had left the Aztecs and promised that someday he would come back. And so when this guy appeared, and he's white like Quetzalcoatl was, they thought, this must be our god, come back. And so Montezuma sent him gifts. Montezuma ruled over nearly 400 cities and more than 125,000 square miles. So at this, Cortez ordered his men to run the ships aground so that no one could get on them again and sail off and return to Cuba from which they came. He also knew that once he had decided to go inland, if he returned to Cuba, he would be arrested for insubordination. So he proceeded inland with about 400 soldiers. Cortez added around 5,000 warriors from the different subjugated tribes along the way who despised the Aztecs for their heavy taxes and for taking their best young men for human sacrifices. So he's gathering natives along the way to fight against the Aztecs. On the way, the Spaniards were able to fend off a superior force that outnumbered them 100 to 1. Why? Why were they able to defeat against odds 100 to 1? What did they have that the Aztecs didn't have?
Guns.
Yep, they had guns and other weapons that the Aztecs didn't have. And what else did they have that was kind of a weapon?
Strategy?
I'm not so sure that they had a better strategy if they were defending themselves.
Armor.
They had armor. And what else? Horses. They had horses. The Aztecs didn't have horses. In fact, when the Aztecs first saw soldiers on horses, they thought it was all one being. They thought the men were attached to the horses, you know, kind of like in Greek mythology. So that was kind of scary to them. But that enabled the Spaniards to defeat superior odds. Well, the Spaniards then arrived at the capital city of Tenochtitlan, which was far larger than any city these Spaniards had ever seen. And there Montezuma pursued a policy of appeasement. He tried to give in because he saw how superior Cortez's forces were. So he tried to give in and be nice now that they were at the city. He welcomed Cortez and the army into his city. He put them up in a luxurious palace, and he served them sumptuous feasts. After a few days, Cortez sensed an uneasiness among the Aztec warriors. And so he acted quickly to capture Montezuma and took over the city. The emperor's brother organized a rebellion and trapped the Spaniards in the palace. Cortez tried to quell the rebellion by sending Montezuma onto the palace roof to speak on behalf of the Spaniards. But by now the Aztecs would have none of this. They could see where this was going, and they turned on their king, and Montezuma was killed by stones thrown by his own people. On June 30th, 1520, Cortez decided to sneak out, his soldiers carrying as much treasure as they could. However, many of them were discovered, resulting in more than half of the Spaniards being killed. Many of them, remember, and I don't know if I did mention this to you, but if you notice here in the picture, Tenochtitlan is surrounded by water. It was built on an island in this lake. And so as they're sneaking out, they're going through water, and many of the Spaniards drowned in the waters around Tenochtitlan because they were weighed down by all the gold in their pockets. So the gold led to their demise. In April 1521, Cortez returned with native reinforcements, set siege to the city, and then conducted a bloody house-by-house advance, crushing the Aztec resistance and taking over what was left of the once great capital. So how was he able to defeat this massive empire so quickly? Well, we've mentioned a couple of things. First of all was the superiority of their weapons. They not only had guns and swords, but they also had cannons and horses, as we mentioned. But they were still outnumbered greatly by the Aztecs. Another factor was disease, especially smallpox. By 1558, the population of Mexico had been reduced from a pre-conquest figure of about 10 million to a mere 2 or 3 million. And disease was undeniably a major factor in this. Then there was the Aztec tradition of capturing rather than killing enemies so they could use them for later sacrifices and feasting. Only they weren't invited to the feast, they were the feast. So that led those other tribes to fight very hard on the side of the Spaniards, as well as Spaniards. Nobody wanted to be captured and later sacrificed or eaten. And so that was instrumental in the enlistment of many Indian allies, the natives around there, helping out Cortez. All right, so that's Cortez. That should have been the first person you had there in your notes under the Spanish explorers, under the conquistadors. The location was what? Everybody say it together. What was the location of Cortez victories? Mexico. And who did he defeat? The Aztecs under what leader? Montezuma. All right, and of course this is where we get the idea of Montezuma's revenge. And have you ever experienced Montezuma's revenge? Good. How many of you know what it is? Okay, only one person knows. That's when you go down to Mexico and foolishly drink the water, and you develop the severe need to visit Uncle John over and over again. That's Montezuma having his revenge on all us white people coming down to Mexico. Although it doesn't seem to be a discriminator against whatever color, but anyway, that's Montezuma's revenge. Okay, who's the next conquistador you have? Who do you have, Hayden? There's a voice coming out of Hayden. Did you think I said Devin?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I said, okay. I'll try to speak more clearly. Hayden, tell us, just in case Devin's wrong.
Francisco de Coronado.
Yes, Coronado. Francisco de Coronado. Make sure you speak loudly and clearly because we are videoing the class, and so those that are watching will be able to hear you, and I don't have to repeat everything. What was the location? Lydia?
I had that he explored the south of North America, like Texas and like the modern day Texas and everything.
Right. The present-day southwestern United States, which would include a number of states. You can see here that he came up from Mexico, going through what is Arizona, New Mexico, part of Texas, Oklahoma, up into Kansas. So it's a pretty wide area that he explored. How many of you have been out in that part of the country? Okay, there's a lot of neat things to see out there. Very interesting. What was he looking for? Did you come across that? What was he looking for as he's traveling all around here?
The 7 cities of
Cibola. Yeah, the 7 cities of Cibola. Well, what was so special about the 7 cities of Cibola? Why was he looking for them? He heard it was a good vacation spot? What? Lahana.
there was a lot of treasure there.
Yeah. In fact, it was said that the cities gleamed with gold and silver. The buildings were made out of gold, so you could see them from a distance, the sun shining off of them. Now, scholars today are not certain that there actually was a place called the 7 cities of Cibola, because it didn't take long for the natives there, the Indians, or called Indians in America, to figure out the best way to get rid of the Spaniards. And that was to tell them that there was gold somewhere else. So it may be that they actually made up the 7 cities of Cibola just to get rid of them. I don't know. But that's what he was looking for, and he never found it. One of his band, however, did find something that we still visit today. You know what it was? The Grand Canyon. How many have been to the Grand Canyon? All right, it's a tremendous place, huge. Cortez himself, he's given credit for discovering the Grand Canyon, but I'm sorry, Coronado is given credit, but he wasn't actually the one who did it. It was one of his guys that was out on patrol. And this guy has an interesting name. His name was, oh, my mind's just gone blank now. His name was, I'll think of it in a moment. But he was a black man that was among Coronado's men. And, okay, here it is. His name was Cabeza de Vaca. Cabeza de Vaca. How many of you have taken Spanish? All right, what does that mean? Cabeza de Vaca.
Jamie Floyd. Head of the cow.
Dave.
Yeah, cowhead.
Jamie
So I kind of think that probably wasn't his real name, but maybe it was a nickname. But how would you like to have a name Cowhead? Maybe somebody would like to remember that for your own children someday. Name your child Cabeza de Vaca after this explorer. All right, the next guy we have on your list of conquistadors is who? Who's next? Joey, who's next?
I didn't have this close.
You what?
Ponce de Leon.
Yes.
I wasn't here.
Did somebody tell you?
Yeah.
Oh.
You.
Did it? Oh.
Ponce de Leon. And where did he search? What's the location for his activities? Alex? Haley? Who has the right person? Steph?
He explored the Florida Peninsula.
Right, Florida. In fact, he named it Florida, which means what?
The field of wildflowers.
Flowers. Basically, Florida means flowers. How many have been to Florida? Is that a good name for it?
No.
Did you see flowers when you were there?
No. That's what we'll do.
I'm not sure where you went, but yeah, lots of flowers in Florida. What was he looking for? Was he looking for gold? What was Ponce de Leon looking for? Nate, do you have anything for an accomplishment here?
Yeah, you explored Florence on
Michael, what was he looking for?
I do not know.
People are still looking for it in Florida today. That's why so many old people go down there. Joey?
Fountain of
The
Youth.
Fountain of Youth, right? Isn't that why they go down there?
Yes.
You're looking for the Fountain of Youth? Some think they have actually found it. They got in the sunshine. All right, the next explorer, conquistador, is who? Megan, who do you have next?
Hernando de Soto.
Right, Hernando de Soto. There used to be a car named De Soto, named after him. It's a pretty neat car back in the 40s, maybe early 50s, 40s, 1940s. Is something wrong with the 40s?
No, I just thought you were like born in the 40s. So how do you remember?
Not
No,
quite.
that's not me.
Not quite.
Oh, 50s?
Actually, 1950.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
almost the 40s.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of cars from the 40s. When I was
Oh,
a kid.
okay.
So I did see De Soto.
Okay.
All right. Where did he explore? Sarah, where did he explore?
He explored mostly in North Carolina and
Right. So you can see he wandered around quite a bit. Came up through Florida, North Carolina, wandered over here to the Mississippi River eventually, and he dies at the Mississippi River and is buried there. And so he just basically exposed the Spaniards to this part of the country, although they didn't do much with it. They never really settled here. They did settle in Florida, but not up in this area. All right, who's the next guy? I think the next one I put on here tonight, because for some reason your book did not list him, and that's Juan Pizarro. I'm sorry, yeah, next one, Juan Pizarro, right? And where did he explore, Joey?
Peru.
Right, Peru. Folks, there's another map showing all the different explorers, so you can see the places. Anyway, covers quite a bit of present-day United States, the south part anyway. Okay, next we have another person that was not mentioned, I guess, before we get to Pizarro, and that's Balboa. You probably learned about Balboa in maybe elementary or middle school. Balboa ventured across the Isthmus of Panama. He heard from the natives that it wasn't real far to another ocean, and so he came across here and he named this ocean the Pacific Ocean. What does Pacific mean? What's pacified? Yeah, Pacific means peace. Why would he name that the peaceful ocean? What do you think, Michaela? As the Atlantic. The Atlantic, if you look on a globe, you'll see the Atlantic Ocean is smaller, much smaller than the Pacific Ocean. And because it's smaller, storms have a more of an effect, and so it's a rougher ocean. The Pacific Ocean seems very peaceful after being on the Atlantic, which is what he'd always been on. So he called it the Pacific Ocean. All right, that's Balboa. Let's see. Next, then, we come to Pizarro. Pizarro came down this direction, down into Peru. And what civilization did he encounter there? Devin?
Incas?
Right, the Incas. He pursued a similar policy as Cortez had with Montezuma. By the way, here's the Lima and Cusco are the two capitals of Chile. And here are some of the major cities of the Inca empire. They had an empire, whereas Aztecs accumulated mostly gold. The Incas found that in South America they could have access to silver. And the king or the chief of the Incas' name was Atahualpa. He was taken by Pizarro by trickery, and then Pizarro demanded an impossible ransom to get their chief back. He picked a large room in the palace, I think, somewhere in the area, and he said it needed to be filled to the ceiling with gold and silver in order to get their chief back. Well, he thought that would never happen, but figured, we'll get a lot of gold and silver out of it anyway, and I'll kill the chief because they didn't fulfill it. Well, they did fill it. They filled the whole room with gold and silver all the way to the ceiling. And Pizarro didn't want to let Atahualpa go, and so he made up something and had him strangled. Now, it's interesting to read some of the background to the Incas because at the time the Spaniards arrived, they were able to take the Incas more easily because there was already unrest in the Inca Empire. There was already some civil war, some fighting, and I won't go into the details of that, but Atahualpa was not exactly in full control, full power when Pizarro arrived. So we look at the Spanish conquests of America, the conquistadores, the explorers, but they never really firmly established themselves in North America. They stayed to Mexico and to the south. The Spanish in particular were responsible for the genocide of Native Americans. Many people died because of the Spanish presence due to slavery, murder, and death-causing disease. Bartolome de las Casas, he's the one that wrote about Columbus's voyage, said this: "What we committed in the Indies stands out among the most unpardonable offenses ever committed against God and mankind, and this trade in Indian slaves as one of the most unjust, evil, and cruel among them." Now, because Spain and Portugal had competing interests in the New World, the Portuguese, when they're sailing around Africa, got a little off course and landed over here in Brazil, South America. So they claimed South America too. And the Pope didn't want Spain and Portugal fighting a war over this. So he stepped in, totally ignoring England, and divided the world between Spain and Portugal. Drew a line right here called the Line of Demarcation in 1494, just 2 years after Columbus. So every place to the east belonged to Portugal, every place to the west belonged to Spain, which is why the country of Brazil is the only country in Latin America that does not speak Spanish. They speak Portuguese, which is similar, but a different language. All right, any questions about that? Now, as we look at the commerce that occurs between Europe and the Americas, we can see a lot of things going on. Let's start here at the bottom. Well, sugar and rice were imported from Asia all the way over to South America. Cassava, manioc, and cacao came from South America over to Africa. What Africa exported was malaria and yellow fever. Thank you very much. Not only there, but also up into North America. Sugar and rice are also coming from Africa to the Indies. The natives here in this area returned the favor and exported syphilis to Africa and to Europe, wiping out large numbers of soldiers who had engaged in sexual relations with the women in this area. Also from here came maize, which we call corn, potatoes, tobacco, beans, squash, peppers, cacao to Europe and also to Africa. Europeans exported smallpox to North America, which wiped out many Indian tribes, as well as cattle, horses, pigs, wheat, and rye. So here's an idea of the different interaction that was taking place between the this new world and the world from which the colonists or the conquerors came. All right, any questions? I think that because we're ready to look at the European conflict between the different nations, I don't want to get started on that and then only get partway through. So tomorrow, we will begin looking at the conflicts between the different nations in North America. We're going to leave Spain where they are and the Portuguese and look at the Northern European nations that are going to be fighting over North America and what happens there.